You're brushing your teeth. The room is quiet except for the low hum of your electric toothbrush and the faint ticking of a clock you barely notice anymore. But your mind, it's not here. It's not in the bathroom. It's somewhere between a conversation that already happened and one that never will. Somewhere between the apology you never gave and the confrontation you fear is coming. You're not trying to relive the past or script the future. It just happens. Suddenly you're back in that meeting, the one where your voice cracked ever so slightly, and you wonder if they noticed. You're back in that moment from years ago when you didn't speak up, when you let the moment pass and told yourself it didn't matter. But it did. You know it did. So you rehearse. You play out a version of the scene where you say the right thing, where your voice doesn't shake, where they finally understand, or you prepare for the next time. You anticipate every counter-argument. You perfect your tone, assertive but not aggressive, calm but not weak. It becomes a kind of quiet obsession, not out loud, not dramatic, but persistent. A low-frequency hum in the background of your daily life. You loop through these imagined dialogues not because you're broken, but because you're trying to feel prepared. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that words, or the lack of them, had consequences. And if you can just get the words right this time, maybe it won't hurt as much. This isn't madness, it's a mechanism. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from humiliation, from rejection, from chaos. It's scanning for unfinished business, unresolved emotions, and any signs of threat. See, the brain is a storyteller that hates ambiguity, and so it builds narratives. It fills in blanks. It replays scenes, not to torture you, but to complete them. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what's happening. These mental rehearsals aren't just random thoughts. They're your psyche's attempt at closure, at mastery, at control in a world that often gives us none. So no, you're not overthinking. You're trying to reclaim power in moments where you once felt powerless. You're trying to make peace with what went unsaid. You're trying to stay one step ahead of future pain. And maybe, just maybe, you're trying to speak for the version of you that didn't know how to speak before. You don't rehearse conversations because you're dramatic or obsessive or too sensitive. You rehearse because somewhere along the line, speaking became risky. Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, existentially. Maybe it started young. You said something honest, unfiltered, and were met with silence, or worse, a look that said you shouldn't have said that. Maybe you dared to ask for what you needed and were dismissed. Maybe your truth was met with laughter or anger or indifference, and so your nervous system learned a rule so subtle, so deeply ingrained that it now feels like instinct. Only speak when you're sure it's safe. Only express when the outcome is predictable. Only show up when you've rehearsed it to perfection. And if you can't be sure, you go silent, or you script, or you spiral for hours before you send a simple message. It's not overthinking, it's overprotecting, because when communication becomes a battlefield, every word becomes armor, every conversation becomes strategy, every pause feels like danger. This is the part where attachment theory comes in. If you grew up with inconsistent emotional safety, if affection was conditional, if love was tangled in performance, if connection always felt slightly out of reach, then your body remembers. You don't approach conversations as exchanges of ideas. You approach them as tests of belonging. You're not wondering, will they understand me? You're wondering, will I still be worthy after this? And so you rehearse. You rehearse in the car, in the shower, while doing the dishes, in line at the grocery store. You rehearse because it gives you the illusion of control, because uncertainty feels unbearable, because silence on the other end feels like abandonment. It's not because you're weak, it's because once upon a time, being misunderstood felt dangerous, like it would cost you love, or safety, or connection. and in some cases, it did. Seneca once wrote, "The man who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive." But what if, for you, it wasn't death you feared, but disconnection? What if every rehearsal is your psyche trying to ensure you'll still be accepted, still be chosen, still be held? That's not neurotic. That's adaptive. Because if your childhood taught you that connection required calibration, that love had to be earned, curated, or negotiated, then of course you learned to perfect every sentence. Of course your nervous system flinches when a message goes unanswered. Of course your mind spirals after you say something vulnerable. You're not just trying to communicate, you're trying to survive emotionally intact. So the next time you catch yourself rehearsing that conversation in the mirror, don't call yourself ridiculous. Don't shame the part of you that's trying so hard to get it right. That rehearsal, it's not about being eloquent. It's about being allowed to exist in your full truth and still be chosen. Here's the paradox you rarely hear aloud. You rehearse to feel in control, but the more you rehearse, the more out of control you feel. At first glance, it looks like strategy. You're preparing, you're being smart, you're making sure you won't mess it up again. But look deeper. What you're really doing is replaying powerlessness over and over again, like looping the last scene of a film you wish had ended differently, only to realize that the director never handed you the script in the first place. You imagine it. The perfect phrasing, the poised tone, the subtle shifts in your body language. You walk through the entire conversation in your mind like a stage play. You say everything you didn't say before. You finally make them understand. You hold your ground, you remain composed, and yet, the moment you're back in real life, it doesn't go that way. They interrupt, they misunderstand, they shut down, or worse, they don't react at all. And so the cycle continues. You return to the safety of your mind thinking, next time I'll say it differently. Next time I'll be clearer, stronger, colder, kinder. But that next time never comes because the goal was never really clarity. It was certainty, control. And control in human relationships is a mirage. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But when your nervous system is wired for survival, it doesn't seek strength. It seeks predictability. Predictable reactions, predictable outcomes, predictable pain. So you rehearse, not because you're confident, but because you're terrified of improvisation, of letting go of the wheel, of showing up unrehearsed, raw and real, and being rejected anyway. Because here's the truth we rarely say aloud. Most of us don't fear failure. We fear exposure. We fear being fully seen and still not chosen. We fear bringing our whole self to the table and being met with silence. We fear being misunderstood, not because we care about being right, but because we equate misunderstanding with abandonment. So we script, we control, we contort, and in doing so we abandon ourselves, one carefully edited sentence at a time. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." Your why is survival, emotional survival, relational survival, the survival of the self that once believed deep down, if I say the wrong thing, they'll leave. If I'm too much, they'll stop loving me. If I'm too honest, I'll lose them. But the how, the mechanism, is the loop, the endless rehearsal, the mental choreography you dance through in hopes of controlling an uncontrollable stage. You never rehearse just for clarity. You rehearse because there's a scared part of you that believes, if I can just get it perfect, I won't have to feel that pain again. But perfection isn't protection. It's delay, it's avoidance dressed up as preparation. And the real tragedy, the more you chase control, the more you lose it. The more you try to script life, the more life becomes a performance, not a connection. Because people don't follow scripts. And healing doesn't happen on a stage. It happens in the moments that aren't rehearsed. When you let go of the lines and simply speak from the truth beneath them. You might think you're just thinking, just preparing, just having another mental run-through of how the conversation might go. But pay closer attention. Notice what happens in your body the moment the rehearsal begins. Your jaw clenches, not subtly, but like you're biting back words you were never allowed to say. Your breath becomes shallow, almost imperceptible, like your body is preparing for a threat that's not in the room. Your shoulders tighten and inch upward like armor rising, like you're bracing for an emotional impact that hasn't arrived yet. This isn't just mental. This is somatic. Your body is responding as if the imagined is real, because in many ways it is. The nervous system doesn't differentiate well between a remembered experience and a present threat. It reacts to felt meaning, not rationality, to memory, not logic. That unresolved argument from years ago, it's still living somewhere between your chest and your throat. That unsent message, it didn't just disappear when you deleted it. It got lodged in your diaphragm waiting for release. That one time you were shut down, dismissed, or emotionally abandoned, it became a muscle memory. As Bessel van der Kolk writes, the body keeps the score. Because your body remembers what your mind keeps trying to outthink. The tight jaw is the anger you never expressed. The closed throat is the truth you swallowed. The hunched spine is the weight of all the things you didn't get to say. You rehearse, not because you want to, but because your body still believes it's not over. The loop continues because somewhere inside, a part of you is still waiting for resolution, for repair, for someone to say, I hear you, and mean it this time. Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But what if the mind isn't the loudest voice? What if the racing thoughts are just echoes of a body that hasn't felt safe in a long time? Because true strength isn't just cognitive, it's somatic permission. The moment your body is finally told, it's over. You're safe now. You don't have to fight anymore. This is what trauma does. It freezes time. You become stuck in a physiological echo of something that emotionally hasn't completed. So you script to try to finish the loop. You rehearse to regain power over a moment where you had none. But the release you seek isn't in the perfect wording. It's in the breath you haven't taken, the tear you haven't let fall, the truth you haven't let rise. Because the truth is, your nervous system remembers everything. And healing doesn't begin when you silence the thoughts. It begins when you attune to the body beneath them. Your body isn't betraying you. It's alerting you to what's unresolved, to what's still grieving, to the younger version of you who never got closure and is still rehearsing for a conversation they never got to have. You think you're rehearsing a conversation, but pause, look deeper. You're not really trying to get the words right. You're trying to rewrite something that already happened. That apology you never received. The one you tell yourself doesn't matter anymore, but somehow still stings when you're lying awake at night. That defense you never got to make, the moment you froze, stayed quiet, and then replayed endlessly in your mind afterward. That goodbye you didn't get to say. The relationship that ended not with closure, but with silence. That dignity you wish you had protected, but instead you over-explained, over-apologized, or simply let someone walk away with parts of you they didn't earn. You're not trying to win. You're not preparing to argue. You're trying to close a loop that never closed on its own. Carl Jung said people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And this is one of those things. You rehearse not because you're petty, not because you're weak, but because a part of you still doesn't understand why it went down the way it did. You're trying to make sense of what felt senseless, trying to bring order to something that fractured your internal reality, trying to insert reason where there was only chaos. This is not obsession. This is grief in disguise. Grief not just for who hurt you, but for who you had to become in order to survive it, for the version of you that stayed silent when they wanted to scream, for the innocence that shattered when the world didn't make space for your truth. Suffering lies not in the thing itself, but in our resistance to it. And so you rehearse, not to relive it, but to resist it, to change what already occurred, to twist the narrative, edit the dialogue, revise the ending, even though, deep down you can't. The past isn't clay. It doesn't reshape just because we keep molding it in our minds. But here's the paradox. The mind knows it's over. The body doesn't. So you keep running the simulation, hoping one day it will finally resolve, that maybe this time in the rehearsal they'll understand you, they'll hear you, they'll regret what they did. But they don't, because they're not in the room. Only you are, and what you're really doing in all of this rehearsing is trying to give yourself what they never gave you: validation, dignity, closure, control. And maybe that's not wrong. Maybe rehearsal isn't the problem. Maybe it's a ritual, a spiritual effort to metabolize something too big to feel all at once. A way for your soul to say, I remember what happened, and I'm still trying to understand why it mattered so much. So the loop isn't madness. It's mourning, and the mourning is love. A love for yourself so fierce, so precise, that it's willing to sit with the ache until it softens, until it stops needing to perform the same scene over and over just to be believed. The next time the loop begins, when your mind slips almost unconsciously into another silent rehearsal, don't resist it. You don't need to force it away. You don't need to shame yourself for still needing it. Instead, pause. And ask yourself gently, what am I really trying to protect right now? What am I afraid might happen if I don't prepare? What part of me didn't get to speak and still wants to? Because what's looping isn't weakness. It's a younger self knocking at the door of your consciousness saying, I still need to be heard. And this time, maybe you don't abandon them. Maybe you don't quiet the voice. Maybe you sit down, close your eyes and just breathe. Not to make the fear disappear, but to give it air, to stop managing it like a threat and start treating it like a message. Because often, what we call overthinking is just emotional debris. It's the residue of experiences that weren't safe to feel in real time. The truth is, you never rehearsed because you were petty. You rehearsed because the stakes used to be real. Maybe speaking your truth once did cost you connection. Maybe being misunderstood once did lead to withdrawal, or mockery, or silence. But here's the quiet turning point. You're not in that room anymore. You're not that powerless anymore. Alan Watts once said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. You will never arrive at a perfectly articulated version of yourself, and you don't need to. Because your worth was never supposed to be proven through polish. It was supposed to be embodied through presence. You don't need to rehearse your worth. You don't need to script your safety. You are not auditioning for belonging. This world you're in now, it's not the same one where you first learned to shrink. Yes, there will still be misunderstanding. Yes, there will still be moments where your voice shakes or your message falters. But now your value doesn't dissolve just because someone doesn't understand you. Your truth doesn't expire just because it wasn't met with applause. And your voice, trembling, imperfect, raw, is still worthy of being heard. You are not the polished script. You are the aliveness beneath it. You are not here to be flawless. You are here to be real. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And maybe now, the proving isn't about them. It's about you. You proving to yourself that you can show up unscripted and still survive, still be held, still be enough. So the next time you catch yourself rehearsing a confrontation, a confession, a closure, pause. Close your eyes. Let the loop speak. Let it finish the sentence it's been holding for years. And then, gently, remind yourself. You don't have to over-prepare for a war that's already over. You don't have to preempt rejection in rooms where you are already welcome. You don't have to armor your heart against ghosts, because you're not who you were when you learned to rehearse. You've outgrown the need to over-explain. You've outlived the moment that made your voice feel dangerous. You're not broken, you're becoming. And here, in this version of your life, it is safe to be seen. Even if your voice cracks, even if the words are messy, even if you don't always get it right. Because healing isn't about getting it right. It's about granting yourself permission to speak, to stumble, to stand again, to finally live unscripted. And now, you are allowed to begin.